Hi everybody. I've got my glasses on. Normally I don't read from a list. I try to be very direct and talk to you, but I've got a list of names and things that I've got to go through. So if you see me with my glasses on, these aren't my cool shades at night. They're my prescription glasses. Anyway, last night, Randy Jones, the Cowboy of the Village People, he's down here in Florida, and I happen to be in Florida right now, called me up and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." He says, "Come on up to Orlando. I've got tickets from the B-52s. They gave him tickets, and we're going to go backstage and hang out with him afterwards." And I jumped in the car and drove 2 hours, went up to Orlando, and we went to, on Disney property, went to House of Blues and saw the B-52s play live, and we got to hang out afterwards and meet them and hang out for a little bit, and that was really, really great. I'm going to put a link down below. I did a little video clip of us, of some of the stuff, hanging out with them, stuff like that. So when you're done, if you expand that little thing on the side and it drops down, you'll see a link to the B-52s thing that we did. Well, that got me thinking, because I was speaking to Fred Schneider, and I said, I saw you guys back in the 1970s, like 78 or something like that, at Max's Kansas City. And it started getting me thinking of all the clubs and all the great bands that were nobodies back then. And I spent a good part of the day putting the clubs and and some of those names together in New York City. Let me go through the list. There was the Mud Club, which was like the cool, hip place to hang out with. That was down on White Street and Broadway in Chinatown. I remember the stage had a rolling garage, like a storefront rolling gate. That was the curtain for the stage. I'll go through a list of all the names of the people that I saw at these places in a minute. Most of these bands played one or multiple of these places. There was Hurrah, which is a little bit more shishi, and that was up on Broadway and around 68th Street, is second floor on a commercial space. You had I think it was elevator or stairs. Those places were such fire traps, because if the place ever went up in flames, no one would have ever gotten out. There was Max's Kansas City, which is legendary, which we'll talk about. That was on Park Avenue South and about 18th Street, something 17th, 18th, 19th Street. That had two floors. The first floor was a kind of a restaurant, and Andy Warhol and William Burroughs and Taylor Mead and all these New York City celebrities used to hang out down there, and they were famous for their chickpeas. People would buy a drink and basically fill their stomachs with these little dried chickpeas that were in bowls. There was CBGB's, which was on the Bowery, which is quite famous. Trudy Heller's, I just did a story. If you look back in the videos, you'll see I talk about hanging out with Cherry Vanilla, and we went to go see David Bowie around the corner, and I got to hear Young Americans off the 24 track. So if you didn't hear that, you can play that after this. There was the Peppermint Lounge, which was in Midtown somewhere. There was there's the 82 Club. That was on 4th Avenue and 4th Street, and I think it's a gay cruising bar now. But at the time, I remember, as I mentioned, I was working with Cherry Vanilla, and she got so drunk that there was a little bar stool on stage, and she actually fell asleep during a guitar solo. She kind of like nodded out from all the Southern Comfort she was drinking. And Louie's playing the guitar and realizes that she's sleeping, and I had to sneak around the side and poke her and wake her up because she was so blitzed. Those are the good old days. Brooklyn had a place called L'Amour's, which is more of the hair bands, and a little bit later on, went through there. Danceteria was quite a trip. I lived 38 West 38th Street in Manhattan. That's between 5th and 6th Avenues. I had a loft. Now, nobody had lofts in those days, so it was we were like the beginning of lofts. The artist Kenny Scharf lived around the block. Joey Arias was one of my 5 roommates that I had because we couldn't pay the rent. And everybody, Klaus Nomi used to come there, Kenny Scharf, Jean-Michel Basquiat. I think Keith Haring stopped in once or twice. It was kind of like Grand Central Station at one point or another. I had a little recording studio, and the world came through there at one part or another as a hangout. Danceteria was, I think, on 36th Street and 8th Avenue, and I got a funny story, because in those days I got Crazy Color from London before anybody else did. Cherry Vanilla used to get it, her hair was pink. And I would get all kinds of colors like purple and green and blue, put it in my hair when like next to nobody had it. This is way before the punk stuff, like in the 78, something like that. It was just starting to happen, but America didn't have Crazy Color yet. And I went to Danceteria one night, and I had purple hair and a white shirt and tie and a skirt. I think the skirt was electric blue, and the leotards that I put on were canary yellow, and I had red Capezio shoes, looking like a total friggin' clown, but I was cool, right? New wave cool. And I walked up 38th Street. We were right next to 42nd Street, and 42nd Street was like really hardcore, like a blaxploitation movie, pimps and hookers and drugs. And I went up to 7th Avenue and crossed over, and I went to 36th Street to go up towards Danceteria. And coming from, I guess it was 7th or 8th Avenue, was this gang of rough kids. I mean, hardcore. And it's late at night. I'm going to Danceteria like 12, 1 o'clock, dressed up in purple hair and a skirt. And these guys were coming down the block, about 6 of them, kicking the storefronts, knocking over garbage cans, kicking cars. And suddenly, I look at them and freeze, and they look at me, and I thought, oh, dear God, I'm going to get the bejesus kicked out of me. And they took one look at me, and they walked across the street to avoid me. I'll never forget that. I thought, oh, my God, thank you for being a freak, because, I saved myself a beating. There was Club 57, and Club 57 was 57 St. Mark's Place. It was the church. It was the basement of a Polish church, and they rented it out, and it was kind of like a cafe society. Keith Haring used to go there, Jean-Michel Basquiat. I know I'm dropping these names again. Kenny Scharf, Mark Shaman, and Scott Whitman did some plays there. I helped them with something called Living Dolls. I did a sound installation there. And then MoMA, the prestigious Museum of Modern Art, did a retrospective of Club 57, which ran from November 2017 till April 1st, 2018, and I was included in it, which was such an honor. And they told me they took my 1983 Hip Hop Bebop video and 2 film scores into their permanent collection. So I'm a MoMA artist, I guess. My stuff is in their in their permanent collection. So I'm very quite honored. I also did a live sound installation for that same show out at PS1 out in Queens. I did an ambient piece of music out there that ran. But I was in the show from November to April, and so were a lot of other people. Joey Arias, Kenny Scharf, Keith Haring, keep bringing these names up. But we were all part of this downtown collective, the art scene in New York City. And I'm in the permanent collection. Great thing. So I want to name off some of the bands that I got to see during these times who were nobodies. I got to see Springsteen at Max's Kansas City with a folk guitar get booed off the stage. He was just a dude from New Jersey. He had a booking, and I used to go every Friday, every Saturday, take the subway from Brooklyn, take the N train into 14th Street and walk up to 18th Street and Park Avenue there and go to Max's. So ArrowSmith, they used to drive down from Boston in their van, and they would do a set, and then they would hang out downstairs, out front, leaning against their van, trying to get laid. Basically, like, hey, hey, ladies, we're ArrowSmith, and the girls are like, yeah, you're nobody. Kind of funny. Lou Reed, Iggy Pop, that was amazing. The Cars, got to see the Cars, and Patti Smith, and I love Patti Smith because she was a poet, artist, and really dark with her stuff. I got to Lenny Kaye's was a guitar player. Her wife, Stephanie, wound up being in a group I had called Shox Lumania, SHOXLUMANIA. I'll try to put a link. I hope I remember to do that, because I have this band where I have purple hair. Maybe you can see that. It's up on YouTube if you search it. Of course, my friend, my darling Cherry Vanilla, Wayne County, who later became Jane County. It was Wayne County in the Electric Chairs, and she did songs like "Used to Make Me Cream in My Jeans" and all that kind of stuff. The Fast, which later turned into Man to Man, which I work with. The New York Dolls, the Ramones. They were amazing to see. My friend Kevin Kiley, who I love dearly, who's no longer with us, had a group called The Mumps with Lance Loud. Lance Loud had the first reality TV show in the 70s, and Lance and I wound up working together, and I got a whole story about Lance Loud and meeting Sid and Nancy, which I'll talk about later. The Heartbreakers, television. Blondie. Debbie Harry was a bartender. And this is all upstairs at Max's. Downstairs was the restaurant, and the showroom was upstairs. And Blondie was a bartender. And I can't remember the name of the group before Blondie, but she'd get up on stage and sing, and then go back and 10 bar. The Talking Heads and the B-52. So I just saw last night, 40 years later. Amazing. The Bongos. My dear friend Klaus Nomi, which we'll talk about on another thing. Joan Jett was in a group called The Runaways, and they were on tour of all these small rock and roll clubs across America, and they stood there in long chiffon prom gowns, lime green, yellow, and powder blue chiffon gowns, and they played hardcore rock and roll. I think they came in from California. The Damned. The Sex Pistols. Sid Vicious played all of his solo gigs there. Then I remember Devo, this group we never heard of, played, and Brian Eno, who we'd always hang out with at the Mud Club. He used to complain that people thought he was gay, and girls, he couldn't get laid because girls wouldn't pick him up. I remember that. He was after one of my guitar player, the roommate, Catherine, I think her name was. He had the hots for her. But Devo played at Max's, and David Bowie and Brian Eno introduced them as the band of the future. And you got to realize, after all these bands played, they kind of got off stage and put their stuff upstairs, locked it up in the dressing room on the 3rd floor, came back to the 2nd floor, and everybody kind of hung out. So they were nobodies then, but they'd have these long tables and, having drinks and smoking cigarettes. Everybody smoked cigarettes. It was really cool to smoke cigarettes back in those days. But, I feel so lucky that I was in New York at this particular time, and I'm talking around 76, 78 to 80. There's the 80s and further, which I'll talk about. That's a whole different set of music and a whole different set of clubs. But we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have Instagram or YouTube, so we got to go out to these clubs just to be social and to see our friends. Let me take these glasses off. I'm sure that little circle's driving you crazy. Sorry about that. It's the only way I can read, being old and blind. But if you wanted to socialize, either you had your rotary dial phone and you talked, or you basically got your butt up, got on the train, the subway, the bus, and went to Manhattan and hung out at these clubs. New York City was a big city, but the club scene was really small. There was a handful of rock and roll clubs, a handful of dance clubs, and then bars. Bars were different than clubs. You might start at a bar, but you always wound up at a club, and then there was after hours. Bars were open till 4 o'clock in the morning, and then after hours we would start at 4 a.m. and finish at noon, and that's a whole other set of stories. So, like I said, I'm lucky that I got to meet and see all these bands when they were nobody. Hope you're liking the stories. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'm trying to do these unedited and pretty much direct. I don't want to script any of this. I just want to tell you honest, direct stories without any kind of filtering and stuff like that, editing. If you can hit that subscribe button, please, it helps me. Also, that little bell, and you'll know when there's new when there's new episodes coming up. And if you could tell your friends, hey, check out these stories, subscribe, maybe we can get all this stuff out there. All right, folks, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. I tried to do a book, and the book's not working, so this is the best way to do it. And I promise to try to give you really good, fun, cool things to listen to. Thank you.